This audio has been restored by Jim.
The Yeroy of the Rebbe, especially for Isur Chag, to make a Kийнus Torah, which the Rebbe was mishtatef every Farbrengen, by Yachon Shel Pesach in the Kийнus Torah that was going on in 770. So we know how important it is, the Kийнus Torah. We have the honor today to have a Choshev in German, a person that is very much involved in Yagil Torah and gives shiurim. Rabbi Chosid, Rabbi Avraham Ashkenazi, is going to give us some kind of insights into halacha and minhagim. Shkoyach.
Thank you.
If it's going to be, Ma'ariv is about 8:20. I told him that we're not going to stop. If somebody wants to daven at 8:20, please try to do it outside.
Shkoyach, thank you, Rabbi Zalmanov, first of all, for arranging the Kийнus Torah. So I'm going to try to continue Behemshech the same of general theme that was spoke about last week by the Kийнus Torah. Two out of the three people spoke about the calendars, about years, about seasons, etc. So I'm going to share some interesting inyanim about this year's kvios of Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos and some relevant halachas as well, some other points. So first of all, I believe I shared here a few years ago an interesting fun fact that every secular year, with the exception of this year, when Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos, but every other year, no matter when Pesach falls, there's always going to be at least one time that you're going to have to do Erev Tavshilin. If Pesach doesn't fall Sunday like this year, so every other year there's an Erev Tavshilin. And another interesting fun fact that I came across recently is that every secular year, including Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos, there is at least one time 3-day Yom Tov. It's not something that it's very rare. It happens every year, unless you live in Eretz Yisrael, etc. But B'derech Klal, we always have a 3-day Yom Tov every year because no matter when Pesach falls, this year was Sunday, so you have Shabbos, Sunday, Monday. The Pesach itself was 3-day Yom Tov. And then there's 3 other possibilities when Pesach can fall. If Pesach is on Thursday, which is going to be next year, so then Pesach is also 3-day Yom Tov, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. If Pesach falls on Shabbos, then Shavuos is going to be Sunday, Monday. So you have Shabbos, Sunday, Monday. And finally, the last combination is for Pesach to be on Tuesday, in which case that year Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, and Sukkot is going to be a 3-day Yom Tov, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. It's just something interesting to share. So B'negei of Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos, it's brought down that the first year that Bnei Yisrael celebrated Pesach, a year after they left Mitzrayim, that was same kvius, Pesach was on Sunday. See that Advarim goes, according to the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Shavuos, explains that Pesach also, the Pesach that year was on the year that the Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim was on a Thursday. That's what Tes of Nisan, Shabbos Agadol was Yud Nisan, the Yartzeit of Miriam. And then 7 weeks later, Shavuos, Vav Sivan was on Shabbos. There's 49 days plus 2. It's Thursday to Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe explains in Shavuos. And then from Shavuos, it goes 40 days, 40 nights, Shivos HaBetamuz, and then goes to Rosh Chodesh Elul, and then Yom Kippur, according to Tosfos, it was on Monday. And then the next year, when the beginning of this week's Parsha, Rashi brings down Shmini, that it was the Rosh Chodesh Nisan was on Sunday. There's Asro that was Naltel, and one of the things, the first one is that it was the Sunday was the first day of the week. So comes out that if Rosh Chodesh Nisan was on Sunday, like this year, so Pesach also was Sunday, and Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos. Likewise, the second time that Bnei Yisrael celebrated Pesach, which was 40 years later when they entered Eretz Yisrael. We know that out of the 40 years that were in the Midbar, they only celebrated the first year. Rashi brings down in Parshas Baloischa by Pesach Sheni that they only celebrated that Pesach. So the next time that they celebrated Pesach was also, according to Mesorah, that it was the same kvius that of Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos. Pesach the year was Sunday. Then when Yeshua brought the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael, it was the same kvius as this year. So the Rebbe brings this in these 2 points. He brings in a Yod and the Ketasichas Chelek Yud Ches. He mentions there also there's a shita that holds Ibn Ezra. I think he says that by Bayom Hashmini in this week's parsha doesn't really mean Bayom Hashmini from the Shiva Semiyam Miluim. It could mean also Bayom Hashmini of Chodesh Nisan. But regardless, it keeps the same days of the week because Bayom Hashmini, even if Ches Nisan is on Sunday, it's just a week later. The Pesach would also be beginning on Sunday. And then the Rebbe brings B'negei the Pesach that Bnei Yisrael did when they entered Eretz Yisrael. It's known as Pesach Gilgal, and he brings there from Seder Olam, which is also known as Seder Elam Rabba, that was on a Sunday. And then the Rebbe brings another shita that it was that was on a Monday. Seder Adoris brings that the year when Bnei Yisrael entered Israel, Pesach wasn't on a Sunday, it was actually on a Monday. Also, there's a sikha from the Rebbe in Parsha Shmini, the same kiyuz as this year, Tavshin Lamed Daled, Koyach Nisan, Tavshin Lamed Daled. And the Rebbe brings there also the idea that Kibush Yericho was also on Shabbos. The Rebbe explains that the year that Bnei Yisrael entered Israel, so on Yud Nisan they all Minayardin, and then Yud Aleph Nisan they had the Bris Milah, and then Pesach they were Makriv on Yud Aleph, which was Shabbos out of Pesach, and then on Tes Zayin they were Makriv the Emer, and then the Rebbe explains that Achash and Pesach, that's when they began surrounding the wall of Yericho, and then it took 6 days, and on the 7th day they surrounded the wall 7 times. That's when the wall fell, and the Rebbe brings there Avodas Hashem, what do we learn about Kibush Yericho that happened on Shabbos, the same kiyuz as this year. So that's what the Rebbe brings there. The Rechagav, the Rebbe brings there in that sikha that it's interesting that the Seder Adoris does not hold of this kiyuz. He says that it was on Monday, not on Sunday, that the year that Bnei Yisrael came to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe says it's a pele how the Seder Adoris says this. And it doesn't even mention the girsa of the Seder Elam Rabbah that it was on Sunday, like we said. So Lamai said that the Rebbe concludes that Kibush Yericho was on Shabbos, Chav Ches Nisan, the same way that we were talking about that Pesach the year was Sunday. Now the problem with this is that if you do the cheshbon, it was the same year that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, of course, and Moshe Rabbeinu passed away a few weeks before that, and it was Zayin Adar. And if you go with the Seder of the Seder, no pun intended, if you go with the Seder with Seder Elam, Zayin Adar does not fall on Shabbos. That's what comes out. Well, now, how do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu's passing was on Shabbos? So let's begin with Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday. It says in the Gemara Seita, we're going to learn in a few days, that there's a machlekes, I think it's Daf Yud Beis, some of the base. If Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Hoshana Pshuta or Adar Aleph, the whole machlekes begins with saying that the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was put into the Nile, that Yocheved put Moshe Rabbeinu in the basket in the Nile, there's one opinion that says that it was on Shvish al Pesach, Chav Aleph Nisan. Another opinion says that it was on Shavuos, Vav Sivan. Then the Gemara brings, according to the opinion that says it was Vav Sivan, makes sense because Moshe Rabbeinu was born Zayin Adar, and it was 3 months that Yocheved hid him. He was born when he was 6 months, and then after 3 months, Vav Sivan, that's when she put him in the Nile. But if you say that it was Chav Aleph Nisan, there's no 3 months between the Moshe's birthday and that day of Chav Aleph Sivan. So then the Gemara brings that you can say that it was a Shana, that it was a Iber Yar, it was a Shana Melberes, and he had 2 months of Adar, and Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Adar Aleph. And then you have most of the days of Adar Aleph, you had the days of Adar Sheni, and most of the days of Adar Beis. It's not full 3 months, but it goes. You can answer that it was almost 3 months that Moshe Rabbeinu hid. Then Yocheved hid Moshe Rabbeinu until she put Moshe Rabbeinu on Chav Aleph Nisan, which was Shvish al Pesach. Now the Rebbe brings this in a He'ar in Lekut Sichas Chelek Chavav that it's still machlekes between the 2 opinions, if it was a Shana Melberes or if it was a Shana Pshuta. But the Rebbe says we can say that Lekuli Alma Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Adar Aleph, a Shana Melberes. And then you can say that for the other opinion it was more than 3 months, it was 4 months. But we can say that according to everybody, Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Adar Rishon. That's what the Rebbe brings there. Now, regarding Moshe Rabbeinu's passing date, Moshe Rabbeinu's yard site, we find in the Mechilta there's 3 opinions. One opinion says that he passed away on Zayin Adar of a regular year, Shana Pshuta. Another opinion says no, he was a Shana Melberes and he passed away on Adar Aleph. And there is a third opinion that says that he passed away on Zayin Shvat, and it was a Shana Pshuta. Just happens to be my birthday, Zayin Shvat. But no. There's also a famous discussion in Achronim about for those who fast on the yahrzeit of a tzaddik, many people have the minhag of fasting on Moshe Rabbeinu's yahrzeit. So the famous there's a big machlekes about Shana Melberes. When do you fast? Do you fast on Adar Rishon or do you fast on Sheni? Which is connected bichlal to a yahrzeit that falls on Shana Melberes. When do you celebrate? When do you commemorate? Do you do another Aleph, another base? And the Rebbe brings this in Hira and Lekut another Hira in Chelek Tezayin. And there's also in Chelek Chavav, the Rebbe brings about, I think it's on Tetzav, Zayin Adar, and the Rebbe brings there in the He'ara that by both, it appears that it's both inyanim, but not just the birth, but also the Moshe Rabbeinu's passing. The main, the inyana is Be'adar Rishon. That's what's mashma, and the main idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away in Adar Rishon. Now the problem is that even if you say that Moshe Rabbeinu was passed away on Adar Aleph, it still doesn't match with Seder Olam that says that that Pesach was on Sunday, because no matter which approach you take, out of the three that I mentioned in Mechilta, that it was Zayin Adar regular year, Zayin Adar Aleph, or Zayin Shvat, none of those days falls on Shabbos, no matter which combination you use. If there was Sham Pshuta, Sham Oberes, or if Shvat, Adar Aleph, or Adar Beis had 29 or 30 days, it falls on all the days of the week almost, but not Shabbos. So it's still a question according to Seder Olam. If you say that Pesach, the year that the Bnei Yisrael entered Eretz Yisrael, if it was on Sunday, it doesn't match with the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos. According to Seder Hadoros, however, that says that Pesach the year was on Monday, it works out perfectly because you say that it was just a day later. So this year was like this. Zayin Adar was on Friday, Pesach was on Sunday, but if you say that Pesach was on Monday, so then Zayin Adar falls on Shabbos perfectly, and then it makes sense. The only problem is that Seder Hadoros itself, he brings an opinion that says that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday, as we're going to speak soon, that the Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Erev Shabbos and not on Shabbos. And the Rebbe brings this also in the Kutzichas in Chelik Yud Ches. It does work if you say the Adar had 30 days, then it works out that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday, Zayin Adar was a Friday, and then Adar had an extra day, was 30, and then Pesach will fall on Monday. So regarding this opinion, Bichlal, this shita that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away out of Shabbos, so that would work with Seder Olam because you say that it was not on Shabbos. Zayin Adar would be on Friday. Mamish like this year, Zayin Adar was Friday out of Shabbos, and Pesach was Sunday. The first day of Pesach was on Sunday. Erev Pesach Shechal is b'Shabbos. Seder Olam itself, it doesn't say which day of the week it was that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. The problem is that according to the Mehalech of the Rebbe and the way the Alter Rebbe brings down in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Shabbos, we see that we pass in the Moshe Rabbeinu passed away in Shabbos. In Simon Reish Tzadik Beis, Alter Rebbe brings two halachas. The one first in Seif Hey says that the minhag that we say Tziduk Adin Tzikoscha by Mincha of Shabbos because three people passed away at that time. He says Yosef, Moshe, and David. We know that they all passed away on Shabbos. David and Shavuos. Yosef was also brought down that he passed away on Shabbos. And in Allah Chavav, he also brings that the minhag is that we're not kivei a midrash be Michal Ma'arev ki chacham shebeis midrash batel. That's all the Rebbe brings down from the Bach. The Bach brings down from the Zohar that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos, and that's the mehalach that we usually follow. That Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos. Zayin Adar was on Shabbos. There's also the Gemara in Seiton in Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis that says that Oisa Shabbos shel Diyos Zugei Haisa, that when the Shabbos that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, it was the two people, Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua. It's also this says there in the Gemara clearly there was on Shabbos, presumably Zayin Adar, that when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, Zayin Adar because of the Gemara said earlier. Now there's a known Tosfos in Menachos, Daf Lamed, is a famous Gemara Benegea. The last few psukim that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rashi brings this in the end of Chumash, Parshas Zabracha. How could it be that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote that he passed away? There's a famous Gemara that says either that Yeshua was the one who wrote, or that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote with tears. So there, the Gemara, the Tosfos brings a question. He says that how can you say that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos? The Tosfos brings the two inonim that we just mentioned about Mincha of Shabbos that we say to the Kadin, and there's a problem of Kaviyah Medrash on Mincha of Shabbos. Tosfos asks a question: how can you say that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos if it says in the pasuk Ben Me'av Esim Shana Nechi Hayom that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that he was 120 years then when he wrote, and it can't be that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Sefer Torah on Shabbos. We'll see more soon. So that's the question that Tosfos asks. And then also Tosfos brings the Seder Olam, and he says that the Tzarechiyun also because it appeared in the Seder Olam. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday and not on Shabbos. So it's a known Tosfos that he brings these two nikudas. And if you go further, but get this different shittas. If Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos, of Erev Shabbos, the Rebbe brings in Tafshin Lamed when they had the Siyum Sefer Torah, Shech Sefer Torah was a Yud Shvat the year fell on Shabbos, so they did it on Friday after Chatzos. And then in the Sich of Parshas Pekudei, which was a few weeks later, involved other Sheni, the Rebbe spoke about the different shittas about Moshe Rabbeinu's passing, if it was on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos. But he concludes that according to Alter Rebbe, and the Rebbe even adds that according to Rashi also, we follow the simple mehalech that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Zayin Adar, and Zayin Adar was on Shabbos, and Moshe Rabbeinu finished writing the Sefer Torah on Vav Adar. On Vav Adar, that was Erev Shabbos. That's what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe and the Sichas about it's Vav Adar Sheni. Yeah. Like it says in the Gemara and the Zohar that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos. So the question of the Tosfos still remains: how can you say that it says Moshe Rabbeinu says Ben Me'av Esim Shana Hayom, but that's what the Rebbe says there. And interestingly enough, the Rebbe also mentions the Shita that Pesach that year was Sunday, that the year the Bnei Yisrael entered Eretz Yisrael, matches with with the klal of loy bedu Pesach. We know that the loy adu roish, and so it has to be the loy bedu Pesach. Pesach cannot be Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. That matches with the shit of Seder Olam. That Pesach was Sunday, it was not a Monday like the way Seder Adoros brings. It's just interesting because everybody knows that we have the same klal of loy adu roish. Rosh Hashanah can't fall on Friday, but the first Rosh Hashanah was on Friday. And similarly, Shavuos, loy gehaz Shavuos cannot be Shabbos, and the klei alma atorah nitra b'Shabbos. So Vav Sivan according to Chachamim, so it's still the calendar that we have set up nowadays doesn't fall on Shabbos, but that's what the Rebbe says there. And another interesting nekuda the Rebbe said that if you think about it, the Zayin Adar also cannot fall on Shabbos. So the Rebbe says, okay, the works that Pesach, if it was a Sunday, it was not a Monday because then it cannot fall on Monday. But in our calendar, Zayin Adar never falls on Shabbos either. So that's just tzarich. Just something additional to say, but again, this prat that beneged the Chevra Kadisha fast. We find this in many places that Kiddush HaChodesh, but L'maisa the Rebbe still uses the rule of Leib B'du Pesach. It's an additional proof, I would say. Yeah. Some have by us the minhag of Chaver Kedusha in Lubavitch is to fast on Tes Vav Kislev. Main two reasons because it never falls on Shabbos and also because it's a very short day. But some have the minhag to do it on Zayin Adar, the Moshe Rabbeinu's yard site. And I saw once in the Sefer that he says that in Hashanah Be'oberes, the fast should be done on other base. Why? Because on other Rishon, Zayin Adar can fall on Shabbos. So that's inaccurate because, as we mentioned, the Zayin Adar can never fall on Shabbos, no matter if it's Adar Aleph or Adar Base, never falls on Shabbos. So that's just a mistake that I found. Yeah, that's it. Okay. All right. Another interesting nekuda. There's a discussion in the separate inyan now, but there's a discussion Benegea Purim if a bris has to be held on Purim, even amongst the Rabbani Anash, if the bris has to be held after Shacharis as usual, if it should be done before the Megillah. It's similar to the idea that we keep the Rash and Tefillin when we hear the Megillah because it says Ahudim Aysad of Simchasas and Vikar, that it's brought down it's Milah and there's also Tefillin. So there's a discussion if the bris Milah should be held, if it's been done in Shul, if it should be done before Megillah or after davening. And I saw this a few weeks ago, a Purim Torah, so to speak, about this inyan that he says like this: Moshe Rabbeinu was born Zayin Adar, so comes out that Moshe Rabbeinu's bris was on Purim. So what do you think happened back then? Did they do the bris milah on Moshe Rabbeinu? Was it before the Megillah or after the Megillah? That's the question that was posed. So they have different answers that are given. Number one, you can say that Goshen was probably a Mukefes Chayma from the times of Yeshua bin Nun, so the bris Purim was Tes Vav, was not Yudalid. Another answer they can give is that Moshe Rabbeinu, it says in Masech Sota that he was Noilad Mahol, that he was already born circumcised, he already had Bris Milah. And another answer that you can give, as we mentioned earlier, that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on other Rishon, so his bris was on Purim Katan, he wasn't on the regular Purim. But that's just Benegeh that, just more to it. And then I saw that in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, it says that even though Moshe Rabbeinu was already born Mahol, it says that he was Mal L'Shmoina. Moshe Rabbeinu had the Bris Milah on the 8th day. So Mefarshim explained that even though it says in the Gemara that Moshe Rabbeinu was born Mahol, they had to do still a Tafas Dam, so they did a Tafas Dam on the 8th day, which happened to be on Purim. And not only that, they even saw that it says also in some places that besides for Moshe's passing, the Moshe's birth was also on Shabbos. In some places it says that. And even so, the Chassam Sofer brings from the Yavitz that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Shabbos, and the Tafas Dam was supposed to be done on. The Tafas Dam was supposed to be done the next week, Yudalit Adar, but he was pushed off to Sunday, Tes Vav Adar. That's why Yudalit and Tes Vav Adar were fixed in the calendar as days for salvation for the Yidden in the story of Purim. Okay. Just a few more nekudas. Benegeh Avraham Avinu. It says that according to Rashi in Chumash, it comes out that Avraham Avinu's bris milah was in Gimel Nisan, and also his birthday was in Gimel Nisan. Rashi says that the third day that Avraham Avinu had a bris was on Pesach, that's of Nisan, and Rashi also brings down the day that Avraham Avinu Mal himself, it was his birthday. He reached 99 years of age. So it comes out that Avraham Avinu's birthday was Yud Gimel Nisan, and his bris was also Yud Gimel Nisan. And some say there's a different Mesoidas that could be that Avraham Avinu's birth was Yud Beis Nisan, and some even say that it could be that it was Yud Aleph Nisan, the same birthday as the Rebbe, as we know. This is interesting. It's Negel Alocha Lamaisa, Benegeh Avraham Avinu's birth and bris, and also the idea that Bnei Saul they did bris milah a few days before Pesach of that year. That when they enter into Saul, it's brought down. There's in Hilchos Milah and in Hilchos Shabbos, there's a shita of the Rashpatz that he says that you cannot do a bris milah, Shalei Bismano should not be done on Yom Chamishi. Why? Because the third day falls on Shabbos, and there's for a few reasons, either because of chitzor, because it's a tsar for the kid, for the child to cause a tsar for the third day. The third day is the day we know from Abraham is the day that the child has the most pain, so you shouldn't schedule that to happen on Shabbos. Some say even Friday or Wednesday, but many people ask on this chumrah based on these facts that we mentioned about B'nai Avraham Avinu being mauled himself a few days before Pesach. It itself is a proof that there's no problem to do bris milah before 3 days before Shabbos, or even Bnei Yisrael when they came to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, there's different answers brought down, but it's just an interesting point to share. Just to a few more nekudas. This Shabbos we had Yom Tov Shechol Yos b'Shabbos, and there's many interesting inyanim that we don't always have Shabbos on Yom Tov, and there's different discussions that people had this year. B'negia Yud Gimel Midos and Rebbeinu Shalom by Yitzhak Sefer Torah, and also B'negia the Nusach of Askinu, which Askinu we say by Kiddush. But just one more nekuda that I wanted to say is that B'negia the tzedakah on Erev Shabbos, and also by candle lighting. We know that B'derech Klal there's a inyan to give extra tzedakah on Friday, on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. There's also an inyan to give extra tzedakah on by the candle lighting. And I saw in some Sfarim, they say in some Chabad Sfarim, they write that when Shabbos is on Yom Tov, so Bichlal, there's an idea to give extra tzedakah that it brings out of Shabbos, because the same way the Lechamish you have to give for the Friday, you have to give for Shabbos. You can give tzedakah on Shabbos, there's permissible ways, but money mamish, you have to give it on Erev Shabbos. Erev Yom Tov is the same idea. If it's 2 days, you give for 3 days. You give for Erev Yom Tov, you give for the first Yom Tov and for the second Yom Tov. When Shabbos falls on Yom Tov, I saw some brought down that from the Sikha of the Rebbe of Erev Shavuos Tafshin Memhei, it was Dalit Sivan Tafshin Memhei, the Rebbe brings there that when Shabbos and Yom Tov come together, there's an inyan to give kafel u'mechupal. And they write there, so when it's like this past week, for Friday, not only you have to give for Erev Shabbos, and for first day of Yom Tov, which is Shabbos, and the second day of Yom Tov, but you have to give extra also, not just 3 days. You should give more. That's what he said. When Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, but if you look in the Sikha, that's not the Pshat. That Sikha is from Shavuos. Shavuos never falls on Shabbos, as we mentioned. The first day of Shavuos Akapanim, and that year Shavuos fell on Sunday and Monday. What the Rebbe was saying is that Erev Shabbos of the year was Friday, and then it was Shabbos, and then you had Sunday and Monday was the first and second day of Shavuos. The Rebbe was saying they have to give kafel u'mechupal, they have to give for Erev Shabbos, you have to give for Shabbos, you have to give the first day of Yom Tov, which is Sunday, and the second day of Yom Tov, which is Monday. He's not talking about their B'negia Yom Tov Shechol Yos b'Shabbos. Some people brought that as a source, but that's not accurate. And of course, Kol Amar Bar Ezim Meshubach, you can give extra tzedakah, but there's no proof from that Sikha that you have to give extra tzedakah when Yom Tov falls on Shabbos. I just wanted to finish off with the Rebbe, word from the Rebbe on Shavuos Tafshin Tezvav. The Rebbe says that Isru Chag is called in Yerushalmi, it's called Brei de Moyada, it's called the son of Moyed, because it comes the day after the Moyed, and the Rebbe brings from the Gemara, it says Yafik Koyecha Ben B'Koyecha Av, that in a way we can say that Isru Chag has to be greater than the Yom Tov itself, so we have to make sure that we continue all the inyanim of Pesach, the inyanim of Kínus Torah, the inyanim of Livnei Torah, and especially this year, it says that this year's Kfiyuz is an appropriate time for Mashiach to come, when Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos may be Mehirav Yamin. Amen.
Just wanted to tell you, anybody who went to the Tahaluche, there's a paper here to fill up for the Doch to send to the Rebbe. Shkoyach. Yeah.